Darkness doesn't always wait. Sometimes it watches. It lingers in the corners of your vision, slipping just beyond the light. It waits in the quiet places, in the spaces between heartbeats, in the pause before you hear something move, or before you feel something watching you. Sometimes it flutters, a subtle warning, a presence you can't explain, something that shouldn't be there, and yet you sense it anyway. Shadows that bend around it, the air shifts, and a chill runs down your spine. You tell yourself it's nothing, but deep down, you know you're wrong. Stories speak of it. Whispers passed in small towns, late at night, when people shouldn't be speaking at all. Sightings of movement too strange to describe, of eyes glowing in the dark, of wings that whisper through the night, just before tragedy strikes. Tonight, we chase those whispers. We follow the stories that refuse to stay buried. What you hear tonight may linger in your thoughts. It may just sit behind your eyes as you close them at night. It may crawl under your skin like a shadow that refuses to leave. So, lock your doors. Settle in. Listen carefully. Keep your mind open, because not everything that moves in the dark is meant to be understood. Sometimes it's only there to warn, to watch, to wait. And if you dare to join me on this journey, subscribe, follow, and share so the shadows don't remain unheard. This episode of Chasing the Dark contains disturbing themes and explores real accounts, legends, and unexplained phenomena. Some elements cannot be verified and are presented for storytelling purposes. Listener discretion is advised. Before we step further into the shadows, I want to acknowledge someone who helped bring this story to life. One of our contest winners, Miss Kat Von Horror. She requested tonight's tale, and it's thanks to her curiosity, her willingness to wander where the whispers lead, that we're here together tonight, following the trail of the unseen, the unsettling, the impossible. Now, close your eyes. Let the room settle around you, and follow my voice into the dark. They called it the Mothman. Picture a small riverside town in the heart of the Appalachia. Late fall, 1966. The leaves had turned deep crimson and gold, but the wind off the Ohio River carries a chill that promises winter early. Point Pleasant, West Virginia, sits right at the meeting of the two great waterways, the broad, steady Ohio flowing south from Pittsburgh, and the Kanawha rolling in from the east, carrying coal barge traffic from Charleston. The confluence creates a natural harbor of sorts, where the waters mix in slow eddies, and the fog often rolls in thick at dawn and dusk, muffling sounds and softening edges. The town itself numbered around 6,000 people in those days, close-knit, working-class families who'd lived there for generations. Many traced roots back to the late 1700s, when settlers arrived after the Battle of Point Pleasant in 1774, the opening clash of Dunmore's War between colonial militias and Shawnee warriors. That history lingered in place names, old markers, and stories passed down at kitchen tables. Downtown was compact. Main Street lined with brick storefronts, a Rexall drugstore, a five and dime, the Point Theater showing double features on weekends, and diners where men in flannel shirts and work boots gathered for coffee and talk of river levels or the latest mine layoffs. The Point Pleasant Register came out twice a week, covering high school football scores, church suppers, and the occasional traffic accident on Route 35. Life revolved around the rivers and the land. Coal was king of the region, mines dotted the hills, and barges loaded with black gold moved steadily past the town. Farmers worked the fertile bottomlands, growing corn, soybeans, and tobacco, while others commuted across the state line to factories in the Gallipolis or Huntington, Ohio. The Silver Bridge was the lifeline, a sleek silver-painted suspension span that had opened with fanfare on Memorial Day 1928. Designed by the G.E. Greiner Company and built by the American Bridge Company, it stretched 1,760 feet across the Ohio, with a 700-foot main span hanging 102 feet above the water. What made it innovative and later infamous was its I-bar chain suspension system. Instead of traditional wire cables, it used linked steel bars with large eyes at each end, pinned together in chains. The design saved money at the time, bid lower than conventional alternatives, and the aluminum paint gave it a distinctive gleam that locals immediately nicknamed the Silver Bridge. It carried 2 narrow lanes of traffic, no shoulder, no median, and a sidewalk tucked inside the trusses. By 1966, heavier cars and trucks rumbled across daily. The bridge swung slightly under the load in a way that felt normal to regulars. North of town lay a different world, the old TNT area, officially the West Virginia Ordnance Works, sprawling over 8,000 acres of former farmland. It had been rapidly built in 1942 as wartime production ramped up. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers oversaw construction on the crash schedule, turning fields into a massive explosives complex. At peak, it employed thousands, churning out up to 720,000 pounds of TNT per day across 10 production lines, enough to fill shells, bombs, and demolition charges for the Pacific and European theaters. Concrete igloos, dome-shaped bunkers designed to contain blasts, dotted the landscape in neat rows, connected by service roads and rail spurs. Production lines mix nitric and sulfuric acids. With toluene in huge vats, the air carried a perpetual chemical bite. When Japan surrendered in 1945, the plant shut down almost overnight. By the late 1940s, most equipment was salvaged or scrapped, sewers blocked off, and contaminated areas fenced. Parts became a wildlife management zone, but the bunkers remained overgrown with vines, weeds pushing through cracked foundations, rusted chain links sagging. The soil and groundwater held lingering traces of TNT byproducts, earning Superfund status decades later. In 1966, locals still called it the TNT area. Teenagers drove out there to park, drink, or dare each other to explore the igloos after dark. The place felt forgotten, silent except for the wind through the trees. Occasional deer stepping across crackled pavement, and that faint, persistent metallic tang in the air, like old pennies mixed with river mud. Appalachian culture ran deep here. Families were tight. Church on Sunday was non-negotiable. Baptists, Methodists, Pentecostal congregations filling pews in hymns and community news. Storytelling was an art. Ghost tales around wood stoves, accounts of the Battle of Point Pleasant, and the darker legend of Chief Cornstalk. The Shawnee leader had fought at the 1774 battle, then sought peace. In 1777, during a visit to Fort Randolph, near the modern Point Pleasant. Colonial soldiers murdered him and his son under a flag of truce. As Cornstalk lay dying, riddled with bullets, he reportedly uttered a curse. May this land be blighted by nature, its hopes paralyzed, stained by their blood. Some say the curse lasted a century. Others claimed it still echoed in floods, mine disasters, and unexplained misfortunes. Whether believed or not, it added a layer of fatalism to local outlook. Tragedies happen, but the land remembered. Daily life in 1966 felt steady, even comforting in its routine. Kids rode bikes down quiet streets. Transistor radios played the Beatles or Johnny Cash, and Friday night football drew crowds under floodlights. But evenings brought a hush. Fog thickened off the rivers. Street lights haloed in mist, and the Ohio lapped against concrete embankments like a restless sleeper. The town was isolated enough. 2-lane roads winding through hills. No interstate yet, that outsiders felt far away. People locked doors more out of habit than fear. But there was an undercurrent. The war in Vietnam on TV, economic pressures from declining coal, the sense that progress bypassed places like this. By November 1966, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Farmers finished harvest, hunters sighted rifles for deer season, commuters crossed the Silver Bridge without a second thought. The TNT area sat quiet under gray skies, bunkers half hidden in undergrowth. Yet the air felt heavier somehow, the fog thicker, the shadows longer as the sun dipped behind the hills. No one could name it, but the quiet before carried a subtle weight, as if the town itself held its breath, waiting for something to break the stillness. The spark didn't ignite in Point Pleasant itself, at least not right away. On Saturday, November 12, 1966, about 80 miles northeast in the small town of Clendenin, 5 men were digging a grave in the local cemetery under a slate-gray sky. Shovels biting into the cold earth, they paused when something caught their peripheral vision. A large brown human-shaped figure lifting silently from nearby trees. It glided low over their heads, no frantic wind beats, just smooth, deliberate motion, before vanishing into the woods. Kenneth Duncan, one of the diggers, said they watched it for nearly a minute, convinced it wasn't a bird. It looked more like a man, he recalled. Practical men, they mentioned casually to the authorities, who logged it as odd but unremarkable. Perhaps a large owl or crane displaced by the weather. No one connected it to anything bigger, at least not yet. 3 days later, on November 15th, the phenomena arrived in Point Pleasant with force. Around 11:30 p.m., 2 young couples, Roger Scarberry and his wife Linda, along with their friends Steve Mallet and Mary Mallet, were out for a late-night drive in Roger's black 1957 Chevy. They were headed toward a favorite hangout spot in the TNT area, the sprawling abandoned munition complex north of town. The night was chilly, stars sharp overhead, fog beginning to curl off the Ohio River. Route 62 was empty, headlights cutting narrow tunnels through the darkness. As they approached the old North Power Plant ruins, crumbling concrete, rusted metals, weeds reclaiming everything, the beam swept across something standing roadside. At first, they thought it was a person. Tall, muscular, perhaps 6 to 7 feet. Then the eyes reflected. 2 bright circular red glows, about 2 inches wide and 6 inches apart, dominating where a face should be. Linda Scarberry later described it as a slender, muscular man with no clear head or arms visible, just those hypnotic eyes and white or grayish wings folded against its back. You could see muscles in its legs, she said. The figure didn't move aggressively at first. It seemed almost startled by the light, shifting slightly as if shying away. Panic hit instantly. Roger floored the accelerator, the Chevy surging forward. Behind them, the thing rose, straight up, vertically, like a helicopter without rotors or sound. Wings unfolded to an estimated 10-foot span. It took off in pursuit. The couples watched it in the review as it kept pace effortlessly, even as the speedometer climbed past 100 miles per hour on twisting back roads. An eye-piercing screech filled the air, like metal grinding on metal. The creature shadowed them all the way to the Point Pleasant city limits before veering off into the wooded hillside and disappeared. Shaken and breathless, they drove straight to the Mason County Sheriff's Office. Deputy Miller Halston took their statement around midnight. No feathers noted, body humanoid, yet wrong in proportion, eyes so intense they obscured details. The witnesses were adamant. No prank, no misidentification. Halstead was skeptical, but noted their genuine terror and filed the report. The next morning, November 16th, the Point Pleasant Register ran the story in the front page. Couple see man-sized bird, creature, something. A copy editor, needing a catchy headline, coined the name Mothman. Within hours, the name spread like river fog. Locals debated over coffee. Was it a prank? A large bird? A hoax? But the terror in those 4 young voices felt so real. The sightings didn't stop. That same exact evening, November 16th, Marcella Bennett, who was visiting relatives near the TNT area with her infant daughter Tina, her brother Raymond Wamsley, and his wife Kathy, experienced something even more intimate. They had driven to see friends Ralph and Virginia Thomas. Noticing odd lights in the sky earlier, as they prepared to leave around 9 p.m., Marcella carried Tina towards the car. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw movement. A gray figure rising slowly from the ground beside the vehicle, as if he'd been lying in the weeds. Over 6 feet tall, bigger than any man she'd ever seen, with terrible glowing red eyes and what appeared to be feathers or fur. It stood hunched, shoulders forward, neck down. Wert bird? Wert man? Marcella froze, mesmerized. She dropped Tina and couldn't move. Ray scooped up the child who was unharmed, grabbed Marcella, and they bolted back inside the house, bolting the door shut. It wasn't a plane, Marcella later said, but we couldn't figure out just what it was. The fear lingered. She suffered nightmares and avoided the dark roads for weeks. Miles away that same night, in Salem, West Virginia, about 90 miles north from Point Pleasant, a building contractor, Newell Partridge, was watching television around 10:30 p.m. when the screen suddenly went black, accompanied by a loud, metallic whining, like a generator or high-pitched interference. His German Shepherd Bandit began howling wildly. Noel grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside. In a nearby field, 2 red objects glowed like bicycle reflectors, bandit charged towards them despite being called to return. The dog vanished into the darkness and was never seen again. 2 days later, reading about the Point Pleasant reports, Noel connected the dots. The wine, the eyes, the disappearance. He blamed the creature. By late November, reports clustered thickly around the TNT area and river thresholds. Volunteer firefighters spotted a huge bird with glowing red eyes perched on a rooftop near Route 2. A farmer tending livestock watched the towering silhouette on the horizon, wings folded, unmoving, until his animals panicked and scattered. Descriptions converged 6 to 7 feet tall standing, broad-chested, leathery or feathered wings spanning 10 feet, red or amber-colored eyes that induced dread or temporary paralysis. Flight was silent and graceful, gliding, hovering, sudden vertical lifts. On the ground, it shuffled clumsily, seeming to be almost unbalanced. There was no physical evidence surfacing, no footprints in the soft earth, no feathers, no droppings. But secondary effects appeared consistently. Brief car engine stalls near encounter sites, radios hissing static or whining, a metallic taste in the witness's mouth, intense chest pressure like being scrutinized by intelligence. Animals reacted first. The dogs whining at empty shadows, horses refusing to approach certain fields. The town didn't collapse into hysteria overnight. Point Pleasant was practical. Many dismissed early stories as owls or sandhill cranes that migrated nearby with red-eye patches and eerie calls, pranks by bored teens, or mass excitement fueled by the newspaper. Yet unease settled in subtly, parents calling children inside earlier, hunters sticking to lit paths, the TNT area becoming strictly off-limits after dusk. Sheriff's deputies patrolled more, finding nothing but overgrown bunkers and silence. These November encounters weren't fleeting glimpses. They were close, prolonged, shared. Witnesses like the Scarberrys and the Mallets stood by their accounts for decades, rarely seeking attention. Roger Scarberry, in later rare comments, said simply that it scared the hell out of all of us. The pattern was emerging, something deliberate, something observant, drawn to liminal places, abandoned industrial ruins, rivers' edges, roads at night, and it wasn't done. As November bled into December 1966, the initial shock of the first reports gave way to something deeper and more insidious. A growing rhythm of encounters that no longer felt random. What began as isolated, heart-pounding chases evolved into deliberate, almost methodical appearances. The creature, or whatever it was, seemed less like a startled animal and more like a sentinel, positioning itself at edges, riverbanks, hill ridges, the decaying edges of the TNT area, and increasingly, the approaches to the Silver Bridge. Witnesses described it hovering motionless for minutes at a time, wings folded tight against a broad humanoid frame, as if cataloging the town's routine from above. One early December evening, a driver on Route 35, heading home from a shift in Ohio, glimpsed it perched on a guardrail near the river. The figure sat balanced impossibly, wings tucked like a resting predator, eyes red, tracking the car's progress without blinking. The driver slowed down instinctively, her heart hammering, The thing didn't move until the vehicle passed directly beneath, then lifted silently into the fog. There was no chase this time, only observation. Around the same period, a woman walking her dog along the Ohio River path felt a temperature drop sharply. It seemed unnatural even for the wintertime. Her dog froze mid-step, hackles raised, staring upward. She followed its gaze, a dark silhouette framed against the low moon, wings spanning wider than any bird she'd seen, body towering in outline. It hovered there briefly, just long enough for her to register the absence of sound, before gliding away over the water. The dog whimpered for hours afterward. She avoided that stretch of river ever since. Electronic glitches became a signature. Phones rang in empty houses with no one on the line. Receivers buzzed with static bursts that coincided with nearby sightings. Cars sputtered or died briefly near encountered spots, engines coughing as if starved of spark, then restarted once the figure departed. One farmer reported his tractor stalling in a field while a large shape circled overhead. When he restarted it, the engine ran rough for days. Radios hissed interference patterns that locals swore sounded almost deliberate, like coded signals lost in the ether. Animals served as the town's early alarm system. Dogs refused to cross certain fields, whining at empty corners or bolting indoors at dusk. Horses in barns reared without cause, nostrils flaring at the shadows no human could see. Birds erupted from treetops in synchronized panic, leaving unnatural silence behind. Livestock scattered when the figure appeared on the horizons. One farmer found his cattle pressed against fences, her eyes wide, refusing to graze in areas where sightings had occurred. By early 1967, reports had surpassed 50 documented cases, with John Keel, who was a New York-based UFO paranormal researcher, arriving in Point Pleasant in December 1966 to investigate. Keel, already intrigued by the overlapping UFO activity in the region, began interviewing witnesses and logging patterns. He noted that sightings clustered near thresholds, places of transition, bridges, river crossings, abandoned industrial sites, power lines. The creature appeared drawn to human movement, but remained detached, never attacking, and rarely approaching closer than 50 to 100 feet. Some witnesses felt followed for days afterwards, a prickling awareness on the neck, vivid dreams of wings and glowing eyes, and a lingering sense of being measured. Connie Carpenter's encounter on November 27, 1966, which is still fresh in early winter memory, stood out for its daylight boldness. The 18-year-old was driving near Mason County Golf Course when a tall, grayish figure rose from the roadside. It had massive wings and no clear head due to the intensity of its eyes, and it pursued her car briefly before vanishing. She pulled over trembling. The experience left her shaken enough to report it publicly, adding to the growing file. Thomas Urey, driving Route 62 one winter night, saw it standing roadside before it took off after his vehicle, matching his speed without any effort, and peeling away. Other accounts trickled in from farther afield. A couple near the TNT bunker saw it glide low over fields. A group of teens exploring the ruins spotted red eyes reflecting flashlight beams from on top of an igloo. Mary Heyer, who was a local correspondent for the Athens, Ohio Messenger, became a key writer. She covered dozens of sightings, interviewing witnesses who described consistent traits: 6 to 7 feet tall standing, broad muscular chest. Wings were leathery or maybe feathered, eyes were reflective red or amber that induced temporary paralysis or overwhelming dread. Heyer herself experienced odd anomalies. One January 1967 night, while working late at the county courthouse, a short man with thick glasses, bowl-cut black hair, and a halting voice entered asking for directions. He approached too closely. Staring hypnotically, she felt terror without reason, and he left abruptly. Heyer linked it to the broader strangeness. UFO lights flooded her office with calls after active weekends. Over 500 just one weekend alone. The psychological toll mounted. Families altered routines. Lights left on longer. The children forbidden from going into the woods or playing at the riverbanks after dark. Evening drives were avoided. Shops closed earlier. Diners buzzed with hushed speculation. Skeptics remained, though some blamed sandhill cranes migrating off course. Owls with reflective eyes, or collective hysteria amplified by newspaper coverage. Sheriff George Johnson suggested a large heron or shitepoke, yet for those who'd seen it, explanations rang hollow. The encounters weren't aggressive, but the observation felt purposeful, felt intelligent, patient, and waiting. Winter deepened the atmosphere. Snow dusted the hills, fog thickened off the rivers, and the silver bridge's steel girders gleamed coldly under the moonlight. Sightings intensified near the bridge. Figures perched on approaches, hovering above the span, eyes catching headlight reflections. Some claim multiple appearances in a single night across locations that were miles apart, hinting at more than one entity or impossible speed. Keel documented over 100 witnesses by late 1967, noting correlations with UFO reports, poltergeist-like activity in homes, and precognitive dreams. The town felt watched, not just by eyes in the dark, but by something threading through the collective consciousness. Air mixed with fascination. Some drove to the TNT area hoping for a glimpse, while others barricaded their doors. The ordinary rhythm frayed. Hearts raced at shadows. Sleep drew uneasy, and the question lingered unspoken. Why here? Why now? By mid-1967, the appearances tapered, but never fully ceased until the end. The dread had taken root, a quiet certainty that something extraordinary had settled over Point Pleasant, and it wasn't leaving until its purpose was fulfilled. Friday, December 15, 1967, dawned a cold and overcast in Point Pleasant. Gray skies hung low over the Ohio River, wind slicing through bare trees along the banks. It was the start of the holiday season, Christmas shopping in full swing, families wrapping gifts, kids excited for school break. Rush hour would build as usual. Commuters crossing the Silver Bridge from Ohio jobs back to the West Virginia homes. Shoppers returning with packages, trucks hauling goods. The bridge itself looked no different, its aluminum-painted steel girders gleaming faintly in the dim light. Two narrow lanes carrying steady traffic without complaint. Nobody noticed anything amiss in the morning inspections or routine patrols. The town moved through its day, diners filled with coffee talk, the Point Pleasant Register printing the latest local news, the river flowing dark and steady below. By late afternoon, traffic thickened. Around 4:30 to 5 p.m., the bridge carried dozens of vehicles, estimates later put 37 cars and trucks on the span at the critical moment. Headlights began cutting through early dusk. Horns sounded in mild impatience. The air carried the familiar mix of river dampness, exhaust, and distant coal smoke. No warnings came. No creaks louder than usual. No swaying beyond the normal flex under load. The bridge, 39 years old, had borne heavier traffic in recent years as vehicles grew larger and more numerous. Its I-bar chain, designed innovative in 1928, meant the entire suspended span relied on linked steel bars pinned together, with no redundancy if one link failed. At exactly 5:04 p.m., although some accounts say 4:58 to 5, a single sharp sound cracked across the river like a gunshot or heavy metal snapping. Eyewitnesses on both shores froze. Then, the impossible happened. The bridge began to fold. Starting on the Ohio side, the North I-bar chain, specifically I-bar 330 at joint C13N, fractured in a cleavage break, a tiny stress corrosion crack, invisible during inspections, and worsened over decades of cyclic loading, fatigue, and environmental exposure, finally reached critical size. The pin slipped free. The chain whipped apart. With no backup cables, the failure cascaded instantly. Adjacent links tore. Towers rocked on their rocker bearings. Girders buckled like paper. The entire 1,750-foot main span collapsed under 20 seconds. Folding like a deck of cards, as survivors and onlookers described it. Charlene Wood, starting up the West Virginia approach in her car, watched in horror as the structure ahead disintegrated. It was like someone had lined up dominoes in a row and gave them a push, and they all came tumbling down. She later recounted, "There was a great big splash of water. I could see car lights flashing as they were tumbling into the water. The car in front of me went in. Vehicles plunged 100 feet into the icy Ohio River, some flipping, others crushed under debris. 37 cars fell. 31 went into the river. Water temperatures hovered near freezing, with strong currents. Screams echoed briefly before silence swallowed them. Chaos erupted on both shores. Onlookers rushed to the edges shouting for help. Boats in the water rocked unnaturally, as if disturbed by invisible forces. Some rescuers later swore the river itself seemed to heave. Radios crackled with bursts of static that defied explanation. Emergency calls broke into interference patterns. Dogs on the banks refused to approach the wreckage, whining and backing away. Horses in nearby stables reared in panic. Emergency lights from fire trucks and police cars reflected off the churning water, turning the scene into a nightmare of red and blue flashes amid the black oil slicks and floating Christmas packages. Rescues began immediately and heroically. Local firefighters, police officers, and volunteers launched boats into the freezing current, pulling survivors from the debris. Divers braved the dark, tangled wreckage, cars upside down, bodies trapped in twisted metals. 9 people were injured, but survived. 46 perished, including families, workers, and holiday travelers. 2 bodies were never recovered, lost to the river's depths. The scale overwhelmed the small town. Hospitals filled, families gathered in shock at the riverbank, the air thick with grief and diesel fumes. In the midst of human tragedy, folklore intertwined almost instantly. Some witnesses on shore claimed to see a large, dark shape hovering above the wreckage, wings folded, eyes catching emergency lights in the brief red glow before it melted into the fog. Others recalled final pre-collapse sightings, the figure perched on bridge girders days earlier, or gliding low over the span the night before. Reports clustered near the bridge in the preceding weeks. Figures on approaches, eyes reflecting headlights. No definitive proof tied the creature directly to the event, but the timing fueled speculation. A harbinger, a warning ignored. John Keel, still in the area documenting phenomena, noted the abrupt end to the local sightings post-collapse, as if whatever presence had watched had fulfilled its role. The official investigation launched swiftly. The National Transportation Safety Board, in one of its earliest major highway probes, examined wreckage hauled from the river. By October 1968, findings pinpointed the cause: a cleavage fracture in Ibar 330's lower limb, originating from a flaw that grew over 40 years. The Ibar, inaccessible for visual inspection without disassembly, carried uneven loads in the chain design. Once it failed, progressive collapse was inevitable. No redundancy existed, no sabotage, no external force, no Mothman intervention. The report highlighted design vulnerabilities and inspection limitations, sparking nationwide bridge safety reforms. Mandatory biennial inspections focus on fracture-critical members and eventual federal standards under the National Bridge Inspection Standards Program. Grief blanketed Point Pleasant. Funerals stretched for days. The community mourned collectively. Church services were overflowing, neighbors supporting shattered families. The Silver Memorial Bridge opened in 1967 on a new alignment, safer and wider, but the original site remained a scar. Pilings visible at low water, a quiet riverside plaque marking the tragedy. The river kept flowing, carrying whispers of what had been lost. For many, the collapse wasn't just mechanical. It felt predestined. The Mothman sightings, clustered over 13 months, now seemed like omens. Skeptics pointed to coincidence. A town primed by folklore, stress, and media amplification. Believers saw a pattern, a silent sentinel at the threshold, vanishing once the threshold crossed. Either way, December 15, 1967, marked Point Pleasant forever. Ordinary life interrupted by the extraordinary, then reclaimed by grief. Picture this. You're 14. It's the middle of the night. You slip out a window from one place that's supposed to protect you, and you disappear. No goodbye, no note, just gone. On January 27th, 2025, that nightmare became real for Emily Pike, a bright, kind-hearted 14-year-old from San Carlos Apache tribe. She walked out of her group home in Mesa, Arizona. Days became weeks. Her family searched. Her community waited, silenced. Then, On Valentine's Day, hikers found black contractor bags dumped along a lonely stretch of Arizona highway. Inside, the dismembered remains of a teenage girl. Emily's arms and hands were missing. Her face and head bore the marks of savage violence. 1 full year later, nothing. No arrests, no named suspects, only questions that refuse to fade. Questions that torment her family, her tribe, and anyone who dares to listen. Who took her? Somebody she knew and trusted? A predator who saw vulnerability and seized it? Or something far darker, tied to the very systems meant to keep her safe? Next time on Chasing the Dark, we go deep into the unsolved murder of Emily Pike, the timeline that doesn't add up, the institution failures that let her slip through the cracks, the relentless fight for answers and justice, and why her story is part of a heartbreaking, ongoing crisis facing Indigenous girls across this country. You won't want to miss this one. Keep following, keep sharing, stay vigilant, and stay in the dark with us. With the bridge down and the immediate crisis over, Point Pleasant and the wider world began asking the hard questions. What had people really seen over those 13 months? Was it the Mothman, a flesh and blood creature, a trick of perception, or something stranger? Investigators, biologists, psychologists, journalists, and paranormal researchers all weighed in, offering explanations that ranged from grounded to mind-bending. None closed the case completely, but together they form a mosaic of how the inexplicable gets dissected. The most straightforward, rational explanation came from wildlife experts almost immediately. Biologists, including West Virginia University professor Robert L. Smith, pointed to the sandhill crane as the prime suspect. These large migratory birds stand nearly as tall as a person, up to 4 feet at the shoulder, with wingspans reaching 7 to 8 feet. They have grayish plumage that can appear mottled or leathery in low light, and crucially, patches of bright red skin around their eyes that reflect light dramatically at night, like glowing red orbs when caught in headlights or flashlights. Sandhill cranes glide low and silently during migration, emit eerie rattling calls, and can appear humanoid when standing upright or taking off vertically. In 1966, crane populations were recovering from near extinction, but still rare in the region. A stray individual, also known as a small group, displaced by weather or habitat changes, could explain isolated sightings. Skeptics noted that many encounters happened at dusk or night, in fog or in headlights, perfect conditions for misperception. The hypnotic red eyes, tubidum, lucidum, reflection in large bird eyes. The pursuit behavior, a territorial crane reacting to a moving vehicle. The lack of physical traces. Birds don't leave footprints like mammals. Daniel A. Reed's later analysis of migration patterns suggested that in cases without reported eyeshine, great blue herons, and other tall gray wader common along the Ohio River, might fit better. Even the screeching sounds matched crane vocalizations, described as piercing, metallic, or grinding. Yet the crane theory doesn't account for everything. Witnesses like the Scarberries and Mallets insisted the figure was muscular and man-like when standing, not bird-proportioned. Some saw it rise vertically from the ground without a running start, and descriptions of broad shoulders and no clear neck or head persisted across accounts. Cranes don't hover motionless for minutes or perch on guardrails. Still, in dim Appalachian nights, with fear priming perception, a large bird could morph in the mind into something far more monstrous. Psychological explanations dug deeper into the human element. Once the first newspaper headline hit, couples see man-sized bird, creature, something. A feedback loop began. In a tight-knit community of 6,000, stories spread fast, over coffee at diners, on phone lines, or in church pews. Suggestion is powerful. People primed by vivid reports start scanning shadows expectantly. Ambiguous stimuli, a form of any nocturnal animal, get interpreted through that lens. This is a classic mass suggestion or collective delusion, sometimes called a folie à plusieurs, when shared belief amplifies experiences. Sociologists and psychologists noted the perfect storm: Cold War anxieties, economic strain in coal country, lingering Appalachian folklore, Chief Cornstalk's curse, Thunderbirds, and the TNT area's eerie contaminated vibe. Early witnesses were credible: young couples, contractors, farmers. But trauma and retelling can distort memory. Mary Hires' odd visitor, the short man with hypnotic stare, might tie to stress-induced paranoia. The electronic glitches, coincidence or confirmation bias. Radios and cars fail often in rural areas. People notice them more when they're scared. Mass hysteria theories gained traction post-collapse. The bridge disaster amplified retroactive meaning. Sightings framed as omens. No one recanted Hamas, but memory conformity explains consistency without requiring a real entity. Yet the raw terror in witness voices, decades later, suggested something genuinely shook them, even if psychological. Paranormal interpretations took the opposite path. John Keel, arriving in late 1966, documented over 100 reports and concluded the Mothman wasn't a misidentified bird or hallucination. It was part of a larger, high strangeness outbreak. In the Mothman Prophecies, 1975, he rejected extraterrestrial visitors and proposed ultra-terrestrials, intelligences coexisting in our reality but on a different time frame or energy state. These entities, neither fully physical nor spiritual, manifest according to culture expectations. Angles in biblical times, fairies in folklore, UFOs and men in black in the 20th century, winged humanoids in 1966 Appalachia. Keel linked Mothman to UFO flaps, poltergeist activity, precognitive dreams, and mystical illumination. He saw patterns, aberrations cluster at window areas, escalate before catastrophe, then vanish. The 13-month timeline to the collapse felt deliberate, a procession of the damned, or cosmic game. Ultra-terrestrials, he argued, manipulate perception, create tulpas, and feed on human emotion, fear, awe, chaos, without malice or benevolence. They aren't from outer space. They've always been here, beyond our senses, occasionally crossing over. Keel's ideas drew from Charles Fort and Ivan Sanderson's OINTS, other intelligences. He documented overlapping events, UFO lights beaming witnesses, phone interference mimicking voices, poltergeists in homes. The Mothman in this view was camouflage, a dramatic form to provoke reaction, tied to the bridge reaction as a nexus of emotional energy. Other fringe theories emerged: governmental experiments, psychic projections and collective dread, or even demonic entities. No hard evidence supported any. No clear photos, no captured specimens. But Keel's framework resonated because it embraced the absurdity. The anomalies adapt to belief, escalating when noticed. Ultimately, no explanation satisfied everyone. The physical evidence was absent. No feathers, no footprints, or verifiable images from 1966 to 67. Sightings halted abruptly after December 15, 1967. As if a cycle completed, skeptics leaned toward misidentification plus suggestion in a stressed community. Believers see a genuine entity, biological, ultra-terrestrial, or otherwise, whose purpose eluded us. The debate endures because the witnesses never wavered. Ordinary people, farmers, couples, contractors, described something that shattered their worldview. Whether a crane, hallucinations, or harbinger, the Mothman left an indelible mark, a reminder that reality has edges, and sometimes those edges bleed into the unknown. The Mothman didn't vanish with the Silver Bridge's collapse. It scattered. Sightings of familiar winged humanoids, tall, dark, often with glowing eyes, began surfacing far beyond the Ohio River Valley, often clustering just before calamity. While none matched Point Pleasant's intensity or documented volume, the parallels are striking. Fleeting glimpses in liminal spaces, silent presence, a sense of watchful inevitability. Skeptics call it pattern seeking, humans retroactively linking anomalies to tragedies. Believers see a universal sentinel, an observer appearing at humanity's fragile edges, vanishing once the threshold crosses. Either way, the echoes spread worldwide. The most sustained modern parallel unfolded in Chicago starting around 2011. Paranormal investigator Lon Strickler of Phantoms and Monsters began logging reports. A black bat-winged humanoid, 6 to 10 feet tall, with red glowing eyes, hovering over Lake Michigan, rooftops, parks, and even near O'Hare International Airport. By 2017, sightings peaked. Over 50 credible ones that year alone, with totals exceeding 170 mapped across Chicagoland by 2023 to 24. Witnesses included everyday people, couples on late-night walks along the lakefront, security guards on break, a postal worker at O'Hare who saw it in the parking lot. Even flight crews spotted shadows from the air. Description stayed eerily consistent. Silent glide, broad wings folding against a muscular body, eyes reflecting light like embers. Many encounters happen near water or structures, river walks, bridges, power lines, echoing Point Pleasant's thresholds. Unlike West Virginia, no major disaster followed the Chicago surge. No bridge collapse, no catastrophe tied directly. Some speculated the sightings warned of subtler threats, but the most remained unexplained. Strickler called Chicago a paranormal hotspot. Psychologists suggested urban stress, light pollution tricks, or large birds, amplified by Mothman lore from books and films. Yet witnesses stood firm. The dread felt real, the figure too deliberate for misperception. International reports deepened the shadow. In the Soviet Union, before the 1986 Chernobyl disaster, workers whispered of a black bird, headless, winged, eyes like fire, gliding over Pripyat. It vanished after the explosion, leaving only fear. Near Fukushima in 2011, a witness saw wings shadowing the plant, whooshing through the air. Weeks later, disaster struck. Folklore called them omens. Timing makes it sinister. Russia, Brazil, Serbia, Australia, Europe. Winged shadows appear before floods, fires, cave-ins, and blasts. Sizes and shapes vary, but motives repeat. Silent flight, humanoid posture, disaster-adjacent zones. Witnesses feel dread and knowing of inevitable tragedy. Keel argued a single intelligence, shape-shifting across cultures. Thunderbirds, Ruda, banshees, watching calamity's edge. Skeptics cite birds or shadows, but the pattern chills regardless. Thresholds, timing, dread. The winged shadow drifts wherever vulnerability meets the unknown. What began in Appalachian fog watches far beyond, silent, patient, and waiting. Point Pleasant didn't fall after December 15, 1967. The river kept flowing, the hills stayed green, but the Silver Bridge's scar remained. Pilings at low water, a quiet plaque marking 46 lives. Grief threaded generations. Yet from that wound grew something unexpected. The Mothman, once terror, became the town's guardian spirit. The statue, museum, and annual festival turned dread into heritage, tragedy into community, fear into pride. Life carried on, stubbornly, with shadows of the past still haunting the edges. The winged figure endured beyond one town, from the Appalachia to Serbia, from Fukushima to Australia. Shadowed wings drift where vulnerability meets the unknown. They appear before disaster, silent and patient, leaving dread in their wake. What began in fog and steel stretches farther than we realize. A reminder that unseen forces watch at the edges, and that life, fragile, fleeting, stubborn, continues no matter how dark the shadow is. But those who lived through it will tell you, it never truly left. The Mothman lingers in quiet moments, a prickle on the neck at dusk, a shadow that moves wrong, the weight of unseen eyes, not as terror, perhaps, but as a reminder, the world is larger, stranger, darker than explanations allow. Some legends don't end. They don't resolve neatly. They don't offer proof or comfort. They persist, like breath on your neck when you're sure you're alone, like eyes that never blink, because whatever watched from the woods, from the bridge, was never caught, never explained, never buried. And maybe that's the deepest truth. Not that something was there, but that it may still be there. Darkness doesn't always belong to the past. It moves beside us. It waits in quiet places. It watches the vulnerable. It follows the forgotten. And sometimes, it takes them. Thank you for walking in the shadows with me tonight. Next time on Chasing the Dark, we leave legend behind, step out of folklore, and into something far more real. A 14-year-old girl vanishes into the night. No witnesses, no answers, only silence, and the terrible things discovered weeks later beneath an open sky. Her name was Emily Pike, and someone knows what happened to her. If you felt the weight of the Mothman stories, don't let the next one fade into silence. I'd like to give a deep thank you to my Patreon subscribers. Their support keeps the darkness alive. If you want to linger longer in the shadows, head over to Patreon for behind-the-scenes content, early access, and exclusive interviews with people sharing real-life true crime and paranormal stories you won't hear anywhere else. Follow Chasing the Dark, subscribe wherever you listen, please leave a rating and a review, and share this episode with someone brave enough to step closer to what watches in the dark. Because every follow, every share keeps these stories alive, keeps them heard, keeps them from disappearing. Until next time, lock your doors, check your windows, and listen closely, because the things that live in the dark are already listening. Sweet dreams.